mean, that's when you start looking at the realms of anxiety and things like that, which is something I've been living with for 12 years. Something that really can destroy your whole quality of life very, very quickly.
It definitely can. And since my NDE, I also deal with anxiety because of my sensitivities. So I can relate to that. And I would say one thing about that, just as a food for thought, my martial arts, of course, I don't fight anymore, but I still train and like the movements, the forms, the meditations, the breathing techniques, because this art that I'm in is very, very deep that way. And I might suggest to you, because one of the things that I do when I get into my anxiety moments is I work on a moment of processing through it, working myself through it. I'm finding out what the triggers in that moment, what I need to do in terms of just basically even relieving it. Maybe sometimes I need to scream and yell for a couple of minutes, not in front of anybody, obviously. Do it by myself. Maybe I need to go and hit a heavy bag for a little while, just to figure out something to that point, or just go take a walk for that matter. Just take a nice quiet walk. My point is this: there are things that you can do to help level that off. And I would just suggest maybe find some outlets when that's starting to happen. Maybe it's writing. Maybe it's maybe you're maybe writing. I don't know. Just find your outlet that calms your mind and gives you a focus. It really, what I'm saying is, like Ram Dass says, be here now. Something that brings you really into the moment. And for me personally, I find that it starts to clear away that anxiety. I recognize it, and all of a sudden, even if it doesn't go all the way away, it sort of starts to take a back seat, and I can feel me again, and I'm flowing, and whatever doubts that were starting to creep in clear right away, and I see that big picture, that life path again, and that's kind of the idea of all of it. And it's a lot of what I figure we'll touch upon today as well. Here, is that which supports you being at your best. Those anxieties, that's a fear response. Sometimes it's a fear response at the primal base, but it's also fear response, in a fear of life, because there's damage that's happened, there's tragedies that's happened, we have insecurities. And these insecurities are also fears. It's also fear response stuff, and then these insecurities don't necessarily relate to that same fear I'm talking about in terms of fight or flight. That keeps us sharp and aware of our surroundings.
I think the thing is, anxiety, from my experience, can be it's an absolutely horrible thing to go through while you're going through it, but it can also be one of the most beneficial things in your life, because the amount that it's taught me about. I mean, seeking I wouldn't exist. I wouldn't be interested in life after death. I'd think once you die, that's it forever. I'd think all this spiritual stuff is bull crap. But since having the anxiety now, the amount I've learned since then, I'm now a training psychotherapist.
That's fascinating. That's really cool.
Yeah, and doing seeking I on the side and things like that. I mean, seeking I is mainly the idea. The reason I started it was to find out what happens after we die, because that was something that always terrified me, and it's been really good. But none of that would have existed if the anxiety and the depression I had wasn't around, and it's developed me so much as a person. It's unbelievable, and that's what you try and tell. What I hope to try and tell when I get a psychotherapy practice started up is, you want to tell these people, don't look at it as a bad thing, because it is in the meantime, but afterwards it's going to be the most beneficial thing you'll ever experience in your life.
And you said something key. You said afterwards. A lot of people get caught up in this idea that it's a process that they're stuck in. It becomes a pattern, and it's just they accept in their mind, I'm just somebody who just has anxiety. And in the way you just described it, I appreciate that, because what you're saying, and I've worked with this too, and sometimes it's that adversity, it's that difficulty that does force us to bring out the best in us. It forces us to dig deeper. But at the same time, let's also remember that that's not the only way we grow. So use that in the meantime. If that's where you're at, if the person is in that moment, then delve into it, understand it, let it, dig deep to find those answers, and ask those questions of those things that you're curious about. If you have concerns, especially if it's talking about fear of death, absolutely address it. But as you get to the after the part, realize that growth can continue without having to be in those dark, adverse spaces. The most powerful growth that I've been incurring is when I've been able to let go of all of those things. And yes, it's still a part of the process. I'm not saying force us away. If you're there, deal with it. Absolutely deal with it. But also just don't get caught up in the idea that you always have to be there, and that's the only way you're going to grow. Love, openness, inspiration, I am finding, is my best way to grow. And I inspire and encourage everyone to think about that. Let yourself be inspired to grow, not forced to grow.
That's right. I mean, I've been, throughout my 12 years of it, I've been to psychoanalysts and psychologists, and you can tell just by sitting there listening to them, these are 26-year-olds just out of college. They've learned what they've learned from textbooks, and they're just spouting nonsense.
Yes.
And you're saying, I know all this. I've been living with it for, 3 years at that point. I've been living with this already. You're telling me things that I know. don't do that. They tell you to fight it. They tell you to repress it and hide it, and that's dangerous, very dangerous.
It is extremely dangerous. Definitely face it. Understand it. Make peace with it.
That's it. The main thing is awareness. Be aware of it. Research it, look into it, understand it, and once you understand it, you can begin to tailor it to your own experience.
Yes. Make it a positive. Take that negative and turn that negative, that dark spot, and shift it into something that's a positive.
That's it. Don't look at it as an illness or as something wrong. There's something wrong with you, because it's not. It's just now. It's your nature. It's you. So learn to live as it, and don't try and fight it, because if you try and fight it, you're only going to magnify the effects.
Well, yes, and absolutely true. I agree with that. And then there's also the fact that these people also want to cookie cutter this. They want to assume that it's a one size fits all answer. They're not taking into consideration the incredible dynamics of each individual person. And what works for one person may not work for the next person. And our complexities as people go way beyond any textbook. So that's where I also get, frustrated and even a bit insulted that somebody thinks that they can actually solve a problem, out of a textbook and assume that one answer applies to the entire human race.
That's
Nonsense.
right. Yeah, and it's the same with animals as well.
Definitely.
You look at dogs, for instance. I always use dogs because I've got them.
Right.
But it's the same with any animal. You go to the vets and whatever, and they say, oh, there's something wrong with them. They're not eating. They're whatever. Give them these tablets. He'll be fine. But then what you don't realise is that your other dog's just passed away, and he's grieving.
Right.
And he grieves in a very, very certain way that other dogs don't, because he is also an individual.
Yes.
Very, very different from every other dog in the world. And it's the same with humans. It's the same, I'm sure, with fleas, and I'm sure it's the same with all other sorts of animals.
It's the same with single-celled parameciums.
Exactly.
Every single experience is 100% unique. When we start talking about multiple realities and parallel universes, I've heard like quantum physicists talk about, well, this idea of multiple versions of us running around kind of, I'm not crazy about that idea, because it also takes away from our uniqueness. I'm going, no, it doesn't at all, because each version of you is going to be completely unique if you're going to talk about it. But on that, it's kind of a detailed type of a level.
Well, I mean, that whole parallel universe thing is that there's a parallel universe for every possible decision you could have made in your life, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So therefore, me,
this divine mind completely is processed out that's the infinity of the experience.
Yeah. So me from parallel me, who made the decision not to go into school the day that I developed anxiety. If I'd have stayed home and decided on that decision, because that was a 50-50. We were doing biology, and we were cutting something up. And I didn't want to go in that day because I knew I was quite squeamish and I didn't like it.
Right.
But I did end up going in, and I fainted, and that's what started the anxiety. If I, therefore, in an alternative universe, decided I'm not going in, didn't go in, I'm now no longer Darren, because my personality would be now totally different without that anxiety. So every, even in that sense with the multiple universes, every version of you is going to be totally different and totally unique.
That's what I call one of those like big forks in the road right there. I mean, we have these little forks in the road, like little deviations that happen. That to me is one of those like big pivotal forks in the road, because you could have turned this into something that was like one of your demons, like a lot of people would do. But you're learning to, instead you're making the decision that you want to understand it. You want to get to know it. You want to work with it. That's making peace with it. You know what I mean?
There's so many people out there that will say, I've got anxiety, you owe me a living. I get the disabled parking spots because I'm special and I need money, and help me, I'm not going to work because I can't. And it's a very good excuse to not have to, to get things, basically. And unfortunately, there's a lot of that.
Some people, obviously people will take advantage. That's one of the things about people in this day and age, is that they, you give them an inch, they try to take a mile. And unfortunately, you've got a lot of that, when there's a lot of people that genuinely, benefit from this. It's what they need in that moment, and they're also using it for the right reasons in the right ways. They're not going out with their food stamp money and buying, Coca-Cola or candy or something. They're buying healthy stuff.
That's right. And I mean, these people, generally, I think these people haven't had the true experience that we've had, because if they did, they'd either be dead from their own hand because they couldn't tolerate it, or they'd have been changed to such a level that they'd know better. Even with my depression, I had the choice there when I was suicidal. I could either end it and give up, and I was very close at some stage. Or
been there.
Yeah, or I learn it, learn about it, research it, and understand it. So luckily, I chose the second route, mainly because of my fear of death.
Okay, and I want to touch upon that as well, because going back to the 1990s. Not to say we haven't thought about it even since my NDE, just because I'm just in such a crazy space of sensitivity. But there was a time where I hit like my own personal rock bottom, and I really just wanted out. I felt like my life was a wash. I ruined everything. I was a stockbroker at one time. I was in college, and my mom died. I had a business. I was making a lot of money. I just bought a condo, brand new car. I was starting to live, basically what some people would consider the American dream, whatever that is. That's a subjective thing. So anyway, my mom died. I didn't handle it well. I lost everything, and I got to a point where I felt like, okay, my life's just a wash. I blew it. I ruined it. I am now so broken inside and so weak inside. I don't know how I'm going to get anything back. I don't even know how I'm going to get through a day. So I literally had it in my head. This life's a wash. I got to get out of here. I'm done. I ruined it. I blew it. I don't know how to get back. I'm too weak now. I'm too destroyed inside. I thought to myself, I'm out. I got to go. And then I started to think to myself, because I never really had a fear of death, even though I didn't understand it really back then. I just knew that it couldn't be any worse than what I was experiencing. So my thought process became this. Check this out. So anybody that might be in that suicidal process, I want you to think about this. I got it in my head, and I just occurred to me. I'm like, I had goals for my life. I really had high hopes for this life. And deep down inside, it's like, I don't want to go out like this. I don't know how I'm going to get back to anything worthwhile, but I just don't want to go out like this. But I don't know anything else. I don't know what to do. But you know what? I thought my thing said, baby steps. You know what? Baby steps. I'm going to take just a little tiny step. Even if it's just a little tiny 1-inch little step, I'm going to take a baby step. And that's what I started to do. And I thought to myself, you know what? Suicide will always be there. I can always end it. If I get to a point where I'm like, nope, I don't have it. I can't do it. It's always an option. And this sounds kind of morbid, but it's true. I actually found comfort in that. I found strength in knowing I do have an option. It's not maybe the best option to what most people listening to this are thinking, no, that's not a good option. But at the time, to me, it was an option, a viable option. And it gave me the opportunity to go, you know what? Maybe I could take a couple of little steps. Maybe I could take a chance here, because, hey, if it doesn't work, I can always go. And you know what? I started doing baby steps. And after a little while, this even like a month, I remember looking back and going, wow, just those little baby steps, I can already see the progress. 6 months, I look back and go, wow, some more baby steps. I'm really seeing the progress. This is really starting to work. Yes, the path was still a long ways in the healing, but those baby steps started to add up, and the progress started to be made. And that inspired me to go, you know what, maybe I don't have to end it. Maybe I can really do this after all. It's going to be a long, hard path back, but I think I can do this after all. And that's when I turned it around. Like, you know what, that's when I discovered martial arts in like 1983.
Yeah, exactly. And that's going back to the whole thing that, everybody's way of dealing with something like that is going to be completely, totally different. Unique. And, this is what annoys me as well with these psychologists and these self-help people. They'll say, don't, if you're suicidal, don't do it. Your family loves you, people love you, blah, blah, blah. It's not so bad. But you're thinking, no, let's look at it realistically here. And from us, we can appreciate it. But for someone that hasn't been in that stage, they can't. And obviously, they're trying to help by saying, be positive. Remember, it doesn't work like that. When you're in that position, there is no future. And there is no feeling better. It is, death is the only possible. And it's not a bad thing, because at that point, that's your only option. You're so desperate and so put down that death is a good solution.
It's the preferable option, yes.
But, it's having that awareness that this is, this feeling is an illusion created by our brains pumping all this cortisol or whatever through our body. It's only, reality seems so crap only because our brain is telling us it is. It's an illusion. If we can become aware of that fact, we can then become aware of the fact that this is a temporary situation, as is life, always changing.
And there will be, you have options. You're not optionless, and that's where suicide comes in, because the person has resolved themselves to this idea that they have no other options. That is the choice. That is the only thing they can do.
And it's not a bad thing. That's just objectively how it is.
Right. And I'm not suggesting, my thing is this. I am somebody who believes that we have a choice to decide when it's our time to die. I mean, this idea that if you commit suicide, you're just going straight to hell, that's one unforgivable sin, is complete crap. No. And again, it's all unique for every experience. However, I will say it is truly a tragedy when somebody, especially a young person, offs themselves because they are so depressed, so hopeless about their life and their future that they find death the preferable option.